It's a really important question, I think. It does something that is pretty difficult to do, which is it tries to put us in God's mind. And the first thing to remember with a question like this is we are simply incapable. There is an epistemic gap, what the philosophers called, an epistemic gap between us and God. And that tells us at least two things. One is that we don't even have the intellectual capacity to think in the way God thinks. And so trying to think what he thinks is probably not really worth our trouble. In the same way that my son, who's 4 years old, isn't very good at multivariate calculus. It's not because he's stupid, it's just because he doesn't have the intellectual capacity at the moment to understand that. And so this might be one of those questions that we may well be thinking outside of our league, if you like. But the second thing and more important thing for this question is that while we don't have the intellectual capacity, we also don't have the epistemic position. We're just not in the position to know. We don't have access to the knowledge. And so we can speculate on these things, and what we can do is actually derive some answers from what we do know in the Bible. And so while we might not have an exhaustive, obvious answer in Scripture, there's a very, very clear thread of response that God gives us throughout the Bible and throughout the truth of who he is. And the answer comes down to relationship. God created for relationship. He created so we could be in loving relationship with him and with one another. And it's for that purpose that we have been brought into existence. And there's lots of things that we perceive correctly to be bad, and we may even have our own judgments that it wasn't worth it. But God thinks that it was worth it. The reason that he brought you into existence, and the short answer to this question, having given the long answer, is that because he thinks that you are worth it. He thinks that relationship with you is worth it. He wants something for you, a category and an experience of flourishing in this life and in the next life that makes all of this worth it. Now, obviously there's a lot that we don't understand, and we might even disagree. And with those gaps and uncertainties, God invites us to trust him. The question is, on what basis should we trust him? And the answer to that, of course, is on the basis that this is a God who stepped into the world and proved himself worthy of our trust by taking suffering onto himself and giving of himself. The cross of Jesus Christ offers us the basis on which we can trust God with the things that we don't know. And with the things that we do know, we see wonderfully and excitingly that it's about our relationship with him. And he, the God of the universe, even with all of the brokenness and suffering in the world, he thinks that in the midst of all of that, you are still worth it.